Listen for selected readings from the book of Acts, chapters 10 and 11, from sections of those two chapters. Then he heard a voice saying, "Get up, Peter, kill and eat." But Peter said, "By no means, O Master, for I've never eaten anything that is polluting or unclean." The voice said to him again, a second time, "What God has made clean, you must not call polluted." This happened 3 times. Then Peter began to speak to them. "I truly understand that God shows no partiality. Now the apostles and the believers who were in Judea heard that the Gentiles had also accepted the word of God. So when Peter went up to Jerusalem, the Jewish believers criticized him, saying, Why did you go to Gentiles and eat with them?" Then Peter began to explain it to them step by step, saying, "I was in the city of Joppa praying, and in a trance I saw a vision. There was something like a large sheet coming down from heaven, being lowered by its 4 corners, and it came close to me. As I looked at it closely, I saw 4-footed animals, beasts of prey, reptiles, and birds of the air. I also heard a voice saying to me, 'Get up, Peter, kill and eat.' But I replied, 'By no means, O God, for nothing polluting or unclean has ever entered my mouth.' But a second time the voice answered from heaven, 'What God has made clean, you must not call polluted.'" If then God gave them the same gift that he gave us when we believed in Jesus Christ, who was I that I could hinder God? When they heard this, they were silenced, and they gave thanks to God, saying, "Then God has given even to the Gentiles the opportunity to change that leads to life." For the gift of inclusiveness and belonging, we give thanks.
Listen for words from the Gospels of Luke and John. "And a voice sounded from eternity, 'You are my human child, the beloved. In you I delight.' Once Judas left, Jesus said, 'Now is the chosen one glorified, and God is glorified as well. If God has been glorified, God will in turn glorify the chosen one, and will do so very soon. My little children, I won't be with you much longer. You'll look for me, but what I said to the temple authorities I say to you, where I am going, you cannot come. I give you a new commandment. Love one another. And you're to love one another the way I have loved you. This is how all will know that you are my disciples, that you truly love one another. For the Word that was in the beginning, for the Word that invites and inspires, for the Word embodied in us, we give thanks. A Ukrainian milkman, Tevye, is a Jewish peasant in pre-communist Russia. His community has many challenges. How does he survive? A fiddler on the roof. Sounds crazy, no? But in our little village of Anatevka, every one of us is a fiddler on the roof, trying to scratch out a pleasant, simple tune without breaking our neck. It isn't easy. You may ask, why do we stay here if it's so dangerous? We stay because Anatevka is our home. And how do we keep our balance? That I can tell you in one word: tradition. Because of our traditions, we've kept our balance for many, many years. Here in Anatevka, we have traditions for everything. You may ask, how did this tradition get started? I'll tell you, I don't know. But it's a tradition, and because of our traditions, every one of us knows who they are and what God expects them to do. But when his eldest daughter, Zeitel, approaches her father to ask if she can marry a simple tailor whom she loves, Tevye is deeply traumatized. Through the tradition, he has just betrothed her to an older man. They gave each other a pledge. Unheard of, absurd. They gave each other a pledge. Unthinkable.
Thank you. Very good. I love the fact that you could say Anatevka and Zeitel. I mean, Zeitel is kind of like, can you do Yiddish? Good morning, everyone, and good morning to people on Zoom. I love one little humorous bit from Fiddler on the Roof where Labish, one of the people in the community, races up to the rabbi and says, can you remember this? Is there a proper blessing for the Tsar? And the rabbi says, a blessing for the Tsar? Of course. May God bless and keep the Tsar far away from us. Well, no, I don't want to do a contemporary version of that to one of the leaders of a country that could best to keep the tariffs away from us, if I could continue. Is this sound okay? Yep. So, how did the two communities we heard about, the community from Anatevka and the community in the Acts, the Jerusalem church, how do these two communities inhibit love and inclusivity? Now, to be honest, it's easy, it can happen, any of us could actually do that. So how was love and inclusivity inhibited, but equally, how did transformation occur in those two communities? In the film Fiddler on the Roof, the Ukrainian milkman Tevye is a Jewish peasant, as you heard, in pre-communist Russia. And the film begins as he informs us, every one of us, and in a sense they are and we are, a fiddler on the roof, trying to scratch out a pleasant, simple tune without breaking our necks. It isn't easy, Tevye says. And of course, how does tradition emerge? Who knows how our traditions emerge? But they do. Yet the power of tradition for this community had fixed how love and marriage were negotiated. And fixed tradition can limit and contain the expression of love with freedom. Their tradition had set ways of marriage through a matchmaker. But when Tevye's eldest daughter, Tzeitel, approaches her father with Motel, the young tailor, to ask if they could be married, as you heard, Tevye is traumatized. They gave each other a pledge. Unheard of, absurd. They gave each other a pledge. Unthinkable. Now, we may say, well, that's, Anatevka, that's Fiddler on the Roof. But we create traditions where things other than those traditions, or ways of life or cultures, they become unthinkable. And we exclude people on the basis of that. So how did transformation occur? At first it appears transgressive, doesn't it? I mean, when Tzeitel comes and says that they want to, and Motel, he's very brave if you saw the clip. It initially seems transgressive. They're breaking the rules. But the power and the passion of love, and that's why the Father, and again it's a metaphor, the Father looks in the eyes, and it's the passion of love that contests contained community. Of the young couple, open hearts. And then, of course, Tevye goes, but look at my daughter's face. Look at my daughter's face. She loves him. She wants him. And look at my daughter's eyes. So hopeful. And then he roars, of course, because he's found himself in a contradictory space. Tradition. Our Acts 10 and 11 reading. In our reading, we find the Christian community in Jerusalem still hold an exclusive view of love, even after Easter. And I must say, as I've sort of read it, you kind of think, how could that happen? The words of Jesus in John was to love one another as Jesus loved others, which meant loving as Jesus loved people. And how did Jesus love people? Suzanne Guthrie writes, by befriending and eating with outcasts and sinners, collaborators, prostitutes, the unclean, the impure, the unloved, by stretching the boundaries of his own love. And I personally, and this is not her, this is me, I personally see in many of the encounters the historical Jesus had with people, he was stretched, he was pushed. He allowed himself to not know, and even to say, particularly to some of the women, your faith, I'm watching your faith. So Jesus was like that. Yet the church in Jerusalem still divided the world into the clean and the unclean, into the included and the excluded, into contradiction to the practice of the historical Jesus. How did transformation occur? In this Acts reading, Peter responded to a vision he received, as we heard, which challenged his Jewish cultural and religious ideology, which divided his world up into the clean and the polluted. So even as a Jewish person, he then visits the home of the Roman Gentile Cornelius, ate with them, and at their request, they wanted to hear the story of Jesus, and he shared the story of Jesus. And then on his return to the Jewish Christian congregation in Jerusalem, he faces censure. He faces criticism from the leaders for his cross-cultural and interfaith act. I want to spend some time on Peter's transformation. And I want to use a different term than love. I think love is kind of overworked, but I'd like to use the word eros. Of course, the word eros is very kind of, but equally love. Love can be codependent. Love can be manipulative, can't it? But so, look, I'll just throw this out and happy for feedback. And I'd like to continue this because we don't have that much time, but I'd like to continue this. In our Acts story, we meet a transformed Peter. Would you agree? We meet a transformed Peter. So what happened? What happened given the past? When Jesus was on trial and then executed, Peter strongly denies his association with Jesus. 3 times he denied. 3 times he betrayed. Peter disappeared for a while. And then in John 21, which we've heard a few weeks ago, after Jesus had been crucified, a week or so afterwards, what does Peter do? Reconnects with his buddies and says, let's go fishing again. Let's get out the tools. Let's go back. Forget what happened. Boldly suggesting that they return to their trade. Boldly. There's no, boldly saying, let's go. Acting as if nothing happened and life was normal. His psychological state of denial was palpable. And I think the way that the gospel writers represent the story shows that it was just unbelievable. So what was happening here at a psychoanalytic level in his life? I'm a spiritual director in the Enneagram, so I'm sorry to throw this at you, but I'll just go into the Enneagram just to explain very briefly. The Enneagram, Ennea means 9 points on a circle. It posits that there are 9 basic personality structures which each of us inhabit in our own way. In our own way. 9 points of view, 9 value systems, 9 ways of being in the world, but each with our defences, with our motivations, with our habits, but certainly our defences. Now, my interpretation, and in contradiction to Richard Raw, who's greater than me, I know, he suggests that Peter is a 6. I disagree totally. Peter, for me, expresses an 8 personality style. And what's that? Leader. Taking charge. Well, that's part of. Because often we present a strong part in opposition to an internalised struggling part as part of our lives. So the defence mechanism of a style A personality is denial. A defence mechanism is a way we unconsciously negate and repress whatever makes us feel anxious, vulnerable, sad, or if we've failed. So again, in John 21, Peter had an experience with the risen Christ. Peter's in denial, he's off fishing, and then has an experience. In this spiritual encounter, the risen Christ accompanies Peter through a process of raising to consciousness, bringing from his unconscious into consciousness the dead, the buried, the repressed, the denied experiences. And this to raise and uncover guilt, because obviously it's there festering in Peter. So Peter could see the guilt and in seeing be forgiven and allow Peter to forgive himself. 3 times this risen Christ in this experience asks Peter, "Do you love me?" And it's interesting, the word love just flows between philos and agape. So in this encounter, the word love is being thrown around and tumbled around. And on the 3rd time, Peter gets really upset, we read in that story, because he gets it. When we're upset, we get it. He has entered his unconscious, or his unconscious has entered his consciousness, where his denials were settled. The risen Christ provides the support of a loving other, and it's so important that we do accompany each other at times as loving others. The risen Christ provides the support of a loving other, willing and able to facilitate Peter's unconscious yearning for discovery, for rehabilitation, for transformation. And in trust, the risen Christ assigns to Peter the love and care for his followers. To love the world, in other words, not just his followers, it means to love the world. To lead his community into transformation beyond exclusivism. To change meaning systems and structures so as to embrace the world and welcome those who are different as equals. And so, as divine life delighted in Jesus at his baptism, the risen Christ affirms and delights in Peter. In his metaphoric dying and rising, in a baptism of fire, even with all the contradictions. And I proclaim to us today that we are contradictory beings and life is contradictory. We contradict, we fail, but we're loved. We're never left alone. We're accompanied. And we're encouraged to love each other no matter what happens before us bravely. And so too, divine life affirms all of us here today. Each of us delights in us. We're valued. We're loved as we are. We're equal together. And Peter, he was now fired with a new passion, an eros, I suggest. For me, the term is less powerful and so on. Now, to conclude, it's kind of rambles on a little bit, but it's a conclusion. Peter would not be transformed. Peter would not be fired by passion unless he was accompanied into his inner life, the unconscious. Peter would not have had space inside himself. His imagination would not have been freed to receive the visions he had about inclusivity. Or to have passion for just community unless he was released from his burden, his repressed feelings, the powerful failures that were hidden in his unconscious. As Mari Ruti writes, transformation means mediating between our conscious and unconscious processes of making sense of the world and our contradictions. That is, she writes, that one of the aims of psychoanalysis is to enable us to develop an actively interpretive relationship to our unconscious motivations, to uncover and work through what sabotages our life, our relationships. And so finally, a word on eros, and I'm very willing to throw this out for people to challenge me on because I'm not too sure I'm right, but I'm positive as something that's right. That sounds ambiguous, but let me put this to you, and it may be, I'm just thinking that maybe Jo would have done this herself anyway. A word on eros, which I suggest is a more powerful notion than the overused term love. And of course, I rely here on other sources. I'm not original. Mari Ruti notes that Audre Lorde conceptualizes eros as a source of energy that permeates our whole existence. Eros is that power that intensifies our experiences. And I suggest very much that Peter was then blown away into a new experience and became passionate. Eros connects us with others, of sharing physical, emotional, intellectual connections with loved others. And eros is a source of energy as a dynamic and responsive manner of interacting with the world, the whole world. Every level upon which we sense and experience the world potentially is open to eros as a satisfying experience of our capacity for joy. The power of eros for Lord is such that we are less willing to accept states of despair, resignation, and powerlessness, and that we begin to take responsibilities for ourselves and our actions in the world. It's this energy that we have that's released for life and love, rather than the energy that we use to keep ourself, our failures, pushed down and away. This is because, and I finish this with this sentence, this is because eros allows us to live from within ourselves rather than by external directives that guide us into normative psychic and social arrangements. I'm very willing to discuss these points. Thank you.